It was a Sunday, June 7th, 2015. A quiet evening in Kinnekulle, a sleepy Swedish town known more for its fields and forests than for danger. Lisa Holm, just 17, was wrapping up her shift at a small local café. She texted her dad at 6:23 p.m. "I'm coming home now." That would be the last time anyone heard from her. The next morning, her moped was found abandoned, helmet resting on the seat, keys still in the ignition. But no sign of Lisa. No messages. No calls. Something was wrong. Very wrong. By nightfall, Missing People Sweden had launched a search. What began as a missing persons alert spiraled into one of Sweden's most intense, heart-wrenching manhunts. Volunteers combed the woods. Helicopters scoured the skies. Parents clutched their children tighter. And somewhere out there, a killer was hiding. This is the story of Lisa Holm, a teenager full of dreams taken in an instant, a family broken, a community forever changed. If you care about justice, if you believe every victim deserves to be remembered, stick with us. Because what happened to Lisa could happen to anyone. And the truth is far darker than anyone expected. It was supposed to be an ordinary Sunday, June 7th, 2015. The early Swedish summer had cast a soft, golden glow over the countryside. Warm but breezy. The kind of evening that makes you want to ride with the windows down or take the long way home. In the quiet town of Blomberg, nestled near the Kinnekulle mountain in western Sweden, 17-year-old Lisa Holm was finishing her shift at Café Paklostret. It was her first summer job, humble but charming. The café sat beside a centuries-old monastery, attracting tourists and hikers who came for the scenery and stayed for coffee and pastries. Lisa was a reliable girl. Responsible. Kind. The sort who didn't drink, didn't sneak off, didn't cause trouble. Her friends called her gentle. Her parents called her their sunshine. At around 6 p.m., Lisa began to tidy up. She stacked chairs, wiped tables, and exchanged her apron for a hoodie. She had one thing on her mind. Getting home to her family in Scoved, about 20 minutes away, by moped. Her phone buzzed. It was her dad, checking in like always. She replied, "I'm coming home now." 6:23 p.m. It was the last message she would ever send. Lisa walked outside and approached her moped, parked just beside the monastery stone wall. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows through the trees. The air smelled of earth and honeysuckle. And then nothing. Silence. No one saw her leave. No one saw her ride off. No one knows what happened in that sliver of time. By 7 p.m., Lisa's parents were already growing uneasy. By 8 o'clock, that unease had morphed into a sharp, cold fear. They kept calling, texting. No reply. Lisa wasn't the kind to ignore them. And she would never be late without letting them know. By 9:30 p.m., her father couldn't take it anymore. He got in his car and began to drive the familiar route Lisa would have taken. His eyes scanning every bend in the road, every shadow in the woods, every ditch, every sign. Then, just before 10 p.m., he saw it. Parked next to the cafe, Lisa's moped, just sitting there. Her helmet was still on the seat. Her keys were still in the ignition. His stomach dropped. No teenager walks away from their ride without locking it. Not at night. Not in the woods. Not in Sweden. He searched the cafe grounds. Called out her name. No answer. He checked the monastery. Empty. Panic bloomed. At 10:10 p.m., he dialed 112, Sweden's emergency number. Lisa Holm was now officially missing. The local police arrived quickly, but there was little to go on. No signs of a struggle. No skid marks. No personal items. Just the eerie stillness of an abandoned moped and a vanishing girl. Her parents were certain Lisa hadn't run away. She wasn't impulsive. There were no fights, no secret relationships, no red flags. She had plans. She was supposed to graduate the next year. She loved horseback riding. Her room back home was decorated in soft colors and filled with books. Everything about her life said stable. The police searched the immediate area that night, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Nothing turned up. The next morning, June 8th, Missing People Sweden was contacted. That same day, over 100 volunteers showed up, neighbors, strangers, hikers, off-duty officers. Many didn't even know Lisa. They just knew something was wrong, and that a young girl was out there, possibly hurt, possibly worse. The town of Blomberg transformed overnight. Caution tape was stretched across the cafe's perimeter. Police dogs sniffed through underbrush. Helicopters with heat sensors hovered above the forest. Ground teams spread out in grid patterns, north, east, south, west, eyes peeled for any trace of Lisa. The media arrived next. First the local papers, then the national ones. By that afternoon, Lisa Holm's face was on television screens across the country. But no one could understand it. How could a teenager vanish in broad daylight between the end of a work shift and a ride home? It didn't make sense. Not in Sweden. Not in this town. The police canvassed the area. They interviewed cafe staff. No one reported seeing anything strange. Lisa had left on time. There had been a few customers, nothing unusual. CCTV from the surrounding area was sparse. The rural roads offered little in the way of cameras. Those that existed didn't capture anything useful. A few blurry vehicles, a cyclist, a parked truck. Hours turned into days. The moped, strangely, offered no clues. It hadn't been moved. No fingerprints. No sign of tampering. Her phone wasn't there. Her bag wasn't either. Her family released a public plea. If you know anything, please come forward. Lisa wouldn't just disappear. Someone knows something. By June 9th, the search radius was expanded. Volunteers walked through fields, over hills, through dense forest. Flyers were posted in gas stations, train stations, grocery stores. Boats searched the nearby lake. Drones were deployed. Still nothing. The tension was growing. The silence deafening. Sweden is a country with one of the lowest crime rates in the world. Violent crime is rare, especially in rural areas like this. But now, whispers filled the streets. Was she taken? By who? And why? And then on the fourth day came the first real lead. A search team found something near an old barn about 500 meters from the cafe. The building was known locally as Smedjen or the Smithy. It was part of an abandoned property that hadn't been used in years. Overgrown grass, broken windows, rusted tools. Inside, near a pile of hay, someone spotted something small. A shimmer, an earring, delicate, silver. Lisa's father confirmed it was hers. A few feet away, half buried in dust and straw, was a phone case. More confirmation, more dread. The barn was immediately sealed off as a crime scene. The police brought in forensic teams. They dusted for prints. They scanned for fluids. They took photographs. Outside, searchers formed a tight perimeter. No one knew if Lisa had been taken to this barn or from it. The tone of the entire investigation shifted. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a criminal case. Inside the barn, dogs sniffed for cadaver scent. Officers pulled apart floorboards, opened crawl spaces, searched the surrounding woods. But still no body. No Lisa. Just eerie silence and a building that suddenly felt too close, too cold, too calculated. The mood among volunteers turned grim. Everyone had hoped she was out there, alive, hiding, scared, maybe lost. But now, the air smelled like death, and a single horrifying thought was beginning to form. What if they were already too late? By June 10th, for days had passed since Lisa Holm's text, "I'm coming home now," and still no Lisa. But now there were signs, fragments, clues that painted a chilling picture, even if no one wanted to believe it yet. The abandoned barn, Smedjen, had become the beating heart of the investigation. Once just a forgotten structure in the shadow of a sleepy town, it now drew the eyes of the nation. Cameras panned across its decaying facade. Reporters whispered into microphones. Police stood guard. And inside, forensic investigators scoured every inch, knowing full well that what they found, or didn't, could determine whether the search ended in rescue or recovery. The barn that should have been empty. The earring had been just the beginning. A single glint in the dust. But what really haunted investigators was where they found it. The barn had no reason to be connected to Lisa. She hadn't been known to explore it. It was run down, unlit, and slightly off the path from the cafe. It wasn't on her route home. In fact, you'd have to intentionally go that way, either led or forced. So, why were her belongings inside? Police began to analyze everything. And they weren't alone. Volunteers for Missing People Sweden, though kept outside the crime scene perimeter, continued sweeping the nearby terrain. Searchers divided into small groups. Some took the surrounding forest. Others checked side roads, fields, wells, ravines, even dumpsters. Maps were laid out, coordinates tracked, radios used to report findings. The public was doing everything it could, but the barn, it remained silent, until a sharp-eyed officer noticed something odd on the second floor. A glove between the planks. It was a tiny detail, easy to miss. A corner of fabric peeking out from between two old wooden boards. It was a black glove, wedged tightly between floor planks as if dropped and trampled or intentionally hidden. Investigators gently pried it loose. They photographed it, bagged it. Lisa's parents were called in to identify it, and their faces said everything. It was hers. The barn was beginning to give up its secrets, but in fragments, in hints. The glove, the phone case, the earring. None of it explained what had happened, but it made one thing agonizingly clear. Lisa had been inside that barn, and she hadn't left on her own. Profiling the unknown. Behind the scenes, criminal profilers were brought in. The evidence suggested a chilling pattern. Lisa disappeared in a narrow time window. No one saw her leave. Her personal belongings were found deliberately hidden, not strewn in panic. This wasn't random. This wasn't chaos. It was cold, planned, controlled, which meant the perpetrator wasn't some drifter passing through. No, it was almost certainly someone local. Someone who knew the barn. Someone who knew the area well enough to lead Lisa into it or force her inside without being seen. And then a chilling realization set in. What if the killer was among them? A volunteer? A bystander? A face in the crowd? The fear that had gripped Blomberg began to spread like wildfire. Fear takes hold. Locals no longer let their children walk alone. Men double-checked locks on their barns. Women began avoiding isolated trails they'd walked 100 times before. Blomberg had always been safe. The kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, waved to neighbors, trusted strangers. But now, that illusion was shattered. Everyone was a suspect, and no one was safe. Meanwhile, police dug deeper into Lisa's life. Her phone records, her friends, her social media. Was she meeting someone? Was there a secret boyfriend? A jealous ex? But every thread came up empty. No drama, no red flags. Just a quiet girl who loved animals, music, and spending time with her family. She had no enemies, no known stalkers, no history of risky behavior. It only made her disappearance more terrifying. Because if someone like Lisa could vanish, anyone could. Expanding the search, detectives decided to widen their net. What buildings surrounded the café and the barn? Who had access to them? Who lived or worked nearby? That's when they turned their attention to a nearby property that had recently housed foreign workers, particularly a small group of Latvian construction laborers. The men had been living and working temporarily in the area, fixing up an adjacent building. The proximity was suspicious. Their presence had been low profile, and one of them was drawing attention. He had been seen lingering near the cafe in the past. His demeanor was quiet, but unsettling. A loner. He didn't speak much Swedish. He didn't smile. He kept to himself. His name was Nerijus Bilavicius, a 35-year-old from Lithuania. When questioned casually by police, he seemed nervous, evasive. His story didn't quite line up. And so, without tipping their hand, investigators quietly obtained a warrant to search his living quarters. What they found changed everything. The forensic breakthrough. In the small, dark room where Bilavicius had been staying, police uncovered a set of clothing soaked in industrial detergent, as though someone had tried to scrub out blood or DNA. Nearby, they found a phone cable, zip ties, and what appeared to be a single long strand of light blonde hair, just like Lisa's. But it was what they found on the boots that sealed the suspicion. Traces of soil and hay, matching the exact composition inside the barn. Fibers consistent with Lisa's clothing. And later, Her DNA, confirmed by lab tests. The quiet, distant man had now become suspect number one. But they still had one critical problem. Where was Lisa? They didn't want to tip him off. Not yet. They needed a body. They needed a timeline. They needed a case that could stick. And time was running out. The second barn. While the forensic team worked, Missing People Sweden kept moving. On June 12th, nearly a week after Lisa vanished, volunteers stumbled upon another barn. This one deeper in the forest, on private land, shielded by trees and brush. It was the kind of place you'd never think to look, unless you knew it was there. They radioed police. Officers arrived. Dogs were brought in. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick, still, and then silence. Until the handler called out. He'd found something. Behind a stack of old wooden pallets, in a small crawl space, they saw her. The confirmation. Lisa Holm was found 6 days after she disappeared. Fully clothed. Her body carefully placed. Hidden. Deliberate. There were no obvious injuries, no blood visible. But her expression, the tension in her body, told them all they needed to know. She had fought. She had suffered. She had died in fear. The entire team fell silent. Even the dogs. Word spread in minutes. Across radios. Across newsrooms. Across a nation. Lisa Holm was no longer missing. Lisa Holm had been murdered. The discovery of Lisa Holm's body shattered any lingering hope that she might return home alive. For 6 days, Sweden had held its breath. And now, that breath turned into heartbreak. News anchors struggled to contain their emotion. Volunteers cried on live camera feeds. Strangers, thousands of them, lit candles across the country. And in the town of Blomberg, a cold hush fell. The kind of hush that comes after tragedy settles into your bones. But while the nation mourned, investigators shifted gears. This wasn't just a tragedy now. It was a murder investigation, and someone was about to pay. Forensic precision. Lisa's body was taken immediately for autopsy. Pathologists worked delicately. Every bruise, every scratch, every fiber was documented. She had no visible gunshot wounds, no knife injuries, but there were unmistakable signs of strangulation. The bruising on her neck, the burst capillaries in her eyes, the trauma around her mouth. She had been silenced, deliberately, slowly. But that wasn't all. There were also traces of DNA, foreign DNA, under her fingernails, on her clothing, and most damning of all, inside her body. Lisa Holm had been sexually assaulted. The gentle 17-year-old girl, working a summer job in the Swedish countryside, had been lured, overpowered, and brutalized in her final moments. And the DNA told a story. It matched one man, Neregis Bilavicius. The suspect unravels. The 35-year-old Lithuanian national had already been on police radar since his boots were found with traces of Lisa's DNA and barn debris. But now, there was no doubt. His DNA was on Lisa's body. When interrogated, Neregis refused to cooperate. He denied knowing her. He claimed he had never even seen her. He insisted the police were framing him. But the evidence was overwhelming. His boots had soil and hay matching the murder barn. His work gloves had Lisa's DNA. A cable tie, matching one found in the barn, was discovered in his room. He had no alibi for the time of Lisa's disappearance. And then came the surveillance, CCTV, and a chilling detail. Even in rural Sweden, there were security cameras, small shops, gas stations, train platforms. And one camera, just 800 meters from the café, captured a figure on a bicycle, a shadowy image, riding quickly toward the café and barn area. The timestamp? 6:25 p.m. Just 2 minutes after Lisa's last text to her father. "I'm coming home now." It wasn't enough to prove guilt on its own. But in the context of everything else, the DNA, the proximity, the gloves, the boots, it painted a chilling picture. Police now believe they had the full timeline. The final minutes. Lisa had left work at 6:23 p.m. She walked toward her moped. It's likely she was approached, possibly by surprise. She was taken or forced toward the old barn. Inside, she was likely restrained, assaulted, murdered. Her killer then moved her body Days later, to the second, more isolated barn, where she was hidden under wooden planks. Why move the body? Investigators believe it was an act of calculation, an attempt to mislead or delay discovery. But it hadn't worked. And now, justice was closing in. Arrest and fallout. On June 15th, just over a week after Lisa vanished, Neregus Bilovicius was formally arrested and charged with murder, rape, and deprivation of liberty. The arrest sent shockwaves across Sweden and the Baltics. In Lithuania, media ran the story with headlines like, "Man accused of monster crime in Sweden." In Sweden, the press focused on how a young girl could have been targeted so easily. And in Blomberg, the town that had once been sleepy and safe, people began asking the same question over and over. How did no one notice? How did this man, this stranger, move through their town undetected, unnoticed until it was too late? The Holm family's devastation. Lisa's parents stayed largely silent through the trial. They didn't seek fame. They didn't want the spotlight. They just wanted their daughter back. At her funeral, over 1,000 people gathered. The line of mourners stretched down the street. The church overflowed. Children brought flowers. Teenagers clutched candles. The pastor read from a letter Lisa had once written in school. "I hope I can help people. I want to be someone who brings light to others." That line, simple, heartfelt, broke the room. She had been light, and someone had snuffed it out. The trial of Neregus Bilovicius began in late 2015. Prosecutors laid out the evidence in painstaking detail, the DNA trail, the motive, a sexual attack with fatal consequences, the behavior, attempts to clean evidence, hide the body, deny involvement. The defense tried to claim innocence. They argued that the DNA had been planted or transferred, that the timeline didn't make sense, that Neregus was being targeted because he was a foreigner. But the evidence was too strong. The jury saw through the lies. The judge listened carefully. And in November 2015, the verdict came in. Guilty. The sentence. Neregus Bilovicius was sentenced to life in prison, the maximum punishment under Swedish law. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He would be held in a maximum security facility, far from the forests of Blomberg, far from the barns, far from any future that resembled freedom. But even then, justice felt incomplete, because Lisa was still gone, and a sentence couldn't erase what happened. Legacy and impact. Lisa Holm's case didn't just haunt a town. It changed a nation. In the aftermath, Missing People Sweden saw a surge in volunteers. Rural safety campaigns were launched across small towns. Discussions erupted in Parliament about foreign labor, surveillance, and violence against women. Lisa's story became a symbol, a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, that even the safest places can be penetrated, and that every missing person matters from the first minute. Lisa Holm was only 17. She didn't ask for attention. She just wanted to finish her summer job, ride home, and enjoy her life. Instead, her name became etched in Swedish history, not for what she did, but for what was done to her. Her memory now lives on in the hearts of thousands, in every barn left unlocked, in every daughter hugged tighter, in every candle left burning on a quiet night. If this story moved you, share Lisa's story. Speak up for those who can't. And if someone ever goes missing, don't wait. Call, search, act. Every second matters. Every voice counts. For more true crime stories that deserve to be heard, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. And remember, behind every case is a real person. Let's never forget them. The trial was over. The man was behind bars. And Lisa Holm was buried beneath soft Swedish earth. But the story wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because in the aftermath of her murder, investigators kept digging. And what they unearthed about the killer, about the overlooked red flags, about systemic failures, would send shockwaves through Sweden. Lisa's case hadn't been a one-off tragedy. It had been a preventable one. Who was Neregus Bilovicius? On paper, he was just another laborer. A Lithuanian man born in 1980. A construction worker by trade. No flashy resume. No glaring history. But as investigators peeled back the layers, they began to understand something chilling. Narigis wasn't a ghost. He was a predator who had moved in silence. He had grown up in Kaunas, a gritty Lithuanian city marred by organized crime and economic instability. Friends from his hometown described him as cold, even as a teenager. Distant, strange. There were rumors that he'd mistreated girls, that he'd once followed a classmate home in silence, that he had trouble controlling his rage. But none of it had stuck. No charges, no formal complaints. In Lithuania, these kinds of red flags were often swept aside, and when the economy dried up, Narigis joined the thousands of Eastern Europeans seeking work in Western Europe, no background checks required. He landed a job in Sweden, and just like that, he was dropped into the middle of the Swedish countryside, anonymous, invisible. The systemic failure. This is where the real anger began to build. How did a man like Narigis, with disturbing past behavior and zero accountability, end up in a place where a 17-year-old girl could cross his path, alone and unprotected? The answer was devastating. Sweden had relied heavily on temporary foreign workers for rural construction and agriculture projects. The companies hiring them often used third-party subcontractors, some of which cut corners to save money. This meant no psychological screening, no interviews with references, no local oversight. Workers like Narigis were housed in remote properties, often unsupervised and undocumented, sometimes even paid under the table. In Lisa's case, Narigis had been living in a building just a few hundred meters from her workplace. He would have seen her regularly. He would have learned her schedule, watched, waited, and no one had been watching him. The profile of a killer. Criminal psychologists analyzed Narigis' actions. What stood out wasn't just the violence, but the planning, the control, the calm. This wasn't a frenzied assault. It was methodical. They believed Lisa had been stalked, possibly for days. He'd studied her, maybe even tried to approach her before. The barn wasn't random either. It was pre-selected. He knew it was abandoned, knew it offered cover, knew that no one would hear her scream. And the chilling part? He left no fingerprints. He used gloves. He wore clean-soled boots to mislead tracking dogs. He hid her body under pallets in another barn miles away to buy time. This wasn't his first act of violence, experts believed. Just the first he'd been caught for. Missed opportunities. After the trial, a joint task force began examining open cases across Lithuania and Sweden. One case stood out. In 2013, 2 years before Lisa's murder, a 16-year-old girl in Kaunas had reported being followed by a man who tried to grab her near a train station. She escaped. No arrest was made. The man disappeared. The description? Tall, bald, Eastern European, riding a bicycle. Sound familiar? Another case, same city, a 19-year-old found strangled behind an industrial lot. No DNA match. Case cold. Was Narigis involved? It was impossible to prove. He hadn't left a trail. But the pattern? Unerringly close. Police now believed Lisa might not have been his first victim. Only the first one Sweden had noticed. The hidden timeline. Using digital forensics, police reconstructed the days leading up to Lisa's disappearance. Her Instagram posts, her WhatsApp messages, her Google searches. Nothing was unusual. But Narigis? His search history was a window into his twisted mind. The night before Lisa vanished, he searched. Best place to hide a body in forest. How long does it take for DNA to disappear? Sweden, missing person protocol. After the murder, he stopped using his phone entirely. The man had gone dark, like he was preparing for a clean exit if things ever got too close. This wasn't impulse. It was premeditated. The aftermath for the community. For the people of Blomberg, life didn't just go back to normal. The barns were locked. The fields were emptier. Children were walked to school in groups. And the old sense of Swedish rural innocence? Gone. A town that had once symbolized peace had now become a monument to loss. Lisa's café eventually closed. The church that held her funeral now has a permanent memorial wall for victims of violence. And every summer on the anniversary of her death, Candles are placed at the barn's doorstep, by strangers, by mothers, by children who never even met her. Because Lisa had become something bigger than just a name, she had become a symbol of safety stolen. Legislative ripple effects. Lisa Holm's murder led to real, tangible change in Sweden. Work visa oversight was strengthened. Private housing for foreign workers faced new safety regulations. Police protocols for missing teenagers were updated. No more waiting hours to act. A bill was passed requiring mandatory background checks for any foreign worker in childcare zones or near schools. Sweden had been shaken, and it had decided, never again, a foundation in her name. Lisa's family, quiet and composed throughout the trial, eventually launched a foundation, the Lisa Holm Foundation. Its mission? To raise awareness about violence against women and girls, to fund self-defense programs in rural towns, to support families of missing children. The foundation also works with tech developers on emergency response apps aimed at helping girls signal distress in isolated areas. Her parents never gave interviews, never wrote books, but through the foundation, they let Lisa's voice echo, not as a victim, but as a legacy. One life, many lessons. Lisa was 17. She loved photography. She played guitar. She had dreams of working with animals, and in a single moment, all of that was taken by a man who didn't even know her name. But her story reached millions. Her face became a symbol of justice, of remembrance, of accountability. She wasn't just a victim of one man. She was a victim of a system that didn't look close enough, didn't act fast enough, didn't guard her when it mattered most. And in the silence that followed, Sweden heard the truth loud and clear. We have to do better. If this story made you feel something, do one thing today. Share it. Let Lisa Holm's name live on. Let her death remind us of what happens when evil goes unchecked. And if you see something, say something. Silence lets predators hide, but awareness stops them cold. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that demand to be heard. Hit the bell icon, leave a comment, and remember, every case matters, every voice counts, and every victim deserves to be remembered. Justice had been delivered, a sentence passed, the monster behind bars. But for the people Lisa left behind, nothing about life felt just. The days kept coming, the sun still rose, but everything had changed. Because while the court had closed the case, the grief had just begun. A town in mourning. Blomberg had never made national headlines before. It was the kind of town that lived in whispers, a place of green hills, summer fields, and long silences. But now, it lived in shadows. The café where Lisa worked shut its doors that fall. It couldn't recover. Not from the pain, not from the empty chair, not from the whispers. Tourists stopped coming. Local teens avoided the barn roads, and older residents stopped leaving their doors unlocked. Even nature felt heavier, the wind colder, the skies quieter. Lisa's absence wasn't just a tragedy. It had become a wound. Lisa's bedroom. Months after her funeral, Lisa's parents quietly opened her bedroom door. Everything was just as she had left it. Her jacket still hung over the chair. Her homework was half finished on the desk. A single earring lay on the floor where she dropped it. Her father sat on the bed for an hour and didn't say a word. He just stared at the walls, at the drawings, at the photo booth strips of her and her friends. Her mother dusted the bookshelf. Each book had her daughter's name scribbled on the inside cover. 17 years of memories, all frozen in place. Untouched, unfinished, the silence after screaming. In the months after the trial, the media moved on. The headlines faded. The nightly specials stopped airing. And for the Holm family, the silence that followed was almost worse than the chaos that came before. Because now there were no interviews, no reporters, no vigils, just the cold, aching stillness of a home that would never be whole again. Lisa's sister, who had once shared everything with her, began to sleep with the lights on. She couldn't walk past the moped without crying. Every engine in the distance made her turn her head. The trauma wasn't over. It was just buried, just like Lisa. A justice system questioned. While many praised Sweden's swift conviction of Nerejus Bilovicius, Others began to ask hard questions. Why did it take volunteers to find Lisa? Why hadn't police prioritized the missing girl sooner? Why were violent men allowed to blend into towns without oversight? Sweden, a country known for its safety and social systems, was forced to confront a brutal truth. Their system had cracks. Cracks that allowed foreign contractors to bypass checks. Cracks that treated missing teens as runaways instead of possible victims. Cracks that left isolated rural communities vulnerable. Lisa's death was no longer just a personal tragedy. It was a public failure. Online fury. Social media erupted. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Lisa and hashtag Lisa Holm trended across Scandinavia. People posted photos of her with candles. Artists drew tributes. Writers published open letters to lawmakers. But with that wave of solidarity came a darker undercurrent. Immigration debates exploded. Some used Lisa's murder to attack refugees, immigrants, and foreign workers. It got ugly, fast. And Lisa's parents? They refused to participate in any of it. They didn't want their daughter's memory twisted into a political argument. They didn't want hate in her name. Lisa stood for light, not division. Evidence never forgotten. Inside a police archive, in a locked cabinet marked home case, the evidence remains preserved. A café apron with her name stitched in purple. A torn cell phone case. Soil samples from a barn. Zip ties. The gloves with both his and her DNA. Each item a relic of horror. Each sealed, cataloged, time-stamped. But to investigators, those weren't just case materials. They were the last echoes of Lisa's final minutes. And even now, some of them still review the files, still study the timelines, still wonder, could they have gotten there faster? The answer doesn't change, but the ache never fades. The barns, a ghost trail. Years later, the two barns, where Lisa was held and where she was found, still stand. Locals avoid them. Tourists sometimes stop, take photos, light candles, then leave quickly. One of the barns has a cross nailed to its door. No words, no names, just a symbol of what happened. Residents petitioned to have them demolished. Others wanted them preserved, as a warning. In the end, they were left alone, silent, abandoned, haunted. A sister's voice. In 2018, Lisa's sister broke her silence. She gave a quiet interview to a Swedish radio station. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Lisa wasn't just a victim. She was someone with a life, a future. And I want people to remember that. I want people to remember the good, the laughter, not just the barn. She called for better protections for women, for faster police response, for Sweden to never let this happen again. It was the only time she spoke publicly, but her voice echoed across the country. Global ripples. The story of Lisa Holm didn't just affect Sweden. It traveled. It was featured in true crime documentaries across Europe. Netflix reportedly considered adapting the case into a limited series. German and Finnish newspapers ran front-page retrospectives on the anniversary. And in countries like Lithuania, where Narigis came from, Lisa's murder prompted reevaluations of labor export policies and criminal database sharing. Because Lisa's case proved one thing without doubt. Monsters don't need passports. They just need a moment. And one girl alone. The man behind the bars. Narigis Bilovicius remains imprisoned in Sweden's toughest penitentiary. He has filed appeals, each one denied. Prison guards describe him as distant, unresponsive, withdrawn. He doesn't speak to anyone, doesn't engage in therapy, refuses to participate in inmate programs. He spends his days in silence. But some say that's exactly how it should be, because silence is what he gave Lisa. And now it's all he hears. Lisa Holm's story should never be forgotten. Not because it's tragic, but because it's a warning. About evil, about inaction, about how fast life can be ripped away. So here's what you can do. Speak Lisa's name. Share her story. Support organizations that fight for victims. And always trust your gut when something feels wrong. Because the next time someone goes missing, it could be your town, your street, your daughter. Don't wait. Don't whisper. Don't wonder. act. Lisa Holm's life didn't end when she died, because in the hearts of those she touched and the movement sparked in her name, Lisa's story became something more than tragedy. It became a legacy, a girl full of dreams. Before the barn, before the man, before the silence, Lisa was just a girl, 17, bright-eyed, with a smile that lifted rooms and a heart bigger than her hometown. She loved animals, especially horses and rescue dogs, photography, snapshots of quiet fields and cafe moments, vintage notebooks filled with doodles, lyrics, and short stories, Swedish summers, the kind that smelled like freedom and sun. She had a map on her bedroom wall, tiny push pins in places she wanted to go, Iceland, Japan, the Canadian Rockies. But her biggest dream? To work with wildlife, to become a zoologist, to study and protect the creatures most people ignored. Lisa didn't want fame. She wanted meaning. The last journal entry. After the trial, Lisa's parents released one page from her journal. It was dated just 3 days before her disappearance. Life feels like it's just beginning. I don't know where I'll go, but I want it to matter. I want to make something good. That line became a rallying cry. I want to make something good. Those words were printed on t-shirts, painted on walls, woven into songs, etched onto memorial stones. Because Lisa's final message wasn't about death. It was about hope. From grief, a movement. After Lisa's funeral, her classmates didn't go back to routine. They organized. They launched a campaign called Lisa's Voice. It started small. Self-defense workshops at local schools, flyers on how to report harassment, candlelight vigils in town squares. But within a year, it spread across Sweden. Teenagers were leading seminars. Young girls were speaking up. Victims were telling their stories. What began as mourning became momentum. Lisa had been silenced, but her generation refused to stay quiet. A national awakening. Sweden, often ranked one of the safest places in the world, was forced to face uncomfortable truths. That even here, girls could be stalked. Even here, monsters could move unnoticed. Even here, tragedy could strike in the blink of an eye. And so, change began. New alert systems for missing minors. Better cross-border criminal record sharing with the EU. Mandatory emergency response training in remote municipalities. Funds allocated to expand victim support hotlines. And it didn't stop at law enforcement. Public schools began integrating personal safety education into their curriculums. Girls were taught to trust instincts, create exit strategies, and speak up early. Lisa had wanted to make something good. She did. True crime, real impact. Lisa's case became a global true crime touchpoint. Podcasts, documentaries, feature articles. But unlike many cold, unresolved stories, Lisa's stood apart. Because it wasn't just about mystery. It was about meaning. Each storyteller, journalist, or YouTuber who covered her case was met with the same response. Thank you for remembering her. Because in true crime, it's easy to focus on the killer, to dramatize the horror, to forget the life that was stolen. But Lisa Holm? She demanded to be more than just another headline. The Lisa Holm Foundation. With donations pouring in, Lisa's family launched something extraordinary. The Lisa Holm Foundation. Its goals were clear. Support young women in rural areas. Fund community safety programs. Provide grants for animal conservation, just as Lisa would have wanted. The foundation also partnered with local governments to improve surveillance near isolated bus stops, tech developers to create a panic alert app for Swedish teens, victims' rights organizations to expand trauma counseling access. Each year, on the anniversary of her passing, the foundation hosts a Day of Light, where towns across Sweden light candles and plant trees in her memory. Her parents never made speeches. They didn't need to. Lisa's light spoke for itself. The women she inspired. Lisa's death empowered a generation of girls who'd grown up quiet, scared, and cautious. Now, they were finding their voices. In Stockholm, a 14-year-old girl launched a blog for survivors of school harassment. In Malmö, a group of students convinced their district to install security cameras on backroad bus stops. In Gothenburg, a former victim of assault credited Lisa's story with giving her the courage to tell my own. Lisa became a symbol of resilience, of resistance, of remembrance. She had lived just 17 years, but she changed lives far beyond her own. Memorials in unexpected places. Walk through Sweden long enough, and you'll see her. In a mural beneath a bridge in Uppsala. In a bench inscribed with her name in Stockholm's city park. In the small stone placed beneath a maple tree near Kinnekulle. Her favorite flower, sunflowers, have become a subtle tribute. Each summer, fields bloom yellow across southern Sweden. And among them, people leave notes, bracelets, Polaroids of Lisa, ribbons tied to stems with quiet messages. You're not forgotten. She isn't. The story continues. A Swedish filmmaker once said, "We make films about tragedies because they teach us what not to ignore." Lisa's story is now required study in multiple Swedish high school media programs. Her case is taught not just as a crime, but as a caution. Documentaries about her often end the same way. Not on a scream, but on a sunrise. Because that's what Lisa would have wanted. Not to be remembered for how she died, but for how she lived, and what she left behind. If Lisa Holm's journey has moved you, don't let it stop here. Share her story. Support victim advocacy groups. Speak up when something feels wrong. Evil hides in silence, but justice grows in noise. So, raise your voice. Use your platform. Remember her name. And if you ever feel alone in the world, think of Lisa, a 17-year-old with a camera in her hand, a dream in her heart, and a light that couldn't be extinguished. This is how we honor the lost, by fighting for the living. Lisa Holm's story wasn't supposed to happen. Not in Sweden. Not in 2015. Not to someone so young, so careful, so good. But it did. And the scariest part? It wasn't the first. And it wouldn't be the last. Because the darkness that stole Lisa didn't vanish with her killer's arrest. It still lingers. In the shadows. In the silence. In the gaps where society refuses to look. This chapter? It isn't just about Lisa. It's about the pattern. A pattern hidden in plain sight. Across Europe, similar stories have quietly unfolded for decades. Different names. Different faces. Same outcome. Young women. Alone. Targeted. Gone. The media calls them isolated tragedies. Law enforcement treats them as separate events. But survivors and families know the truth. Predators move freely. Systems fail silently. And the warning signs are always there, ignored. Let's look closer. Finland, the disappearance of Wilma Anderson. Rovaniemi, Finland, just 17 years old. Wilma Anderson was last seen visiting her boyfriend. She never made a home. Days later, police made a grisly discovery. Human remains, partial, dismembered, found in the suspect's apartment. Her killer? A man she trusted. He had a violent past, a known history, but no one had warned her. The case sent shockwaves through Scandinavia. How could someone so dangerous live unnoticed? Wilma's parents spoke out. No one protected her. No one told her who he really was. Sound familiar? Germany, the murder of Maria Leidenberger. Freiburg, Germany. Maria, a 19-year-old medical student, was biking home from a party. She never arrived. Her body was found near a river. She had been raped, drowned, left in the dark. Her killer? A young man from Afghanistan, previously convicted of attempted murder in Greece. He was supposed to be deported. He wasn't. The case ignited a political firestorm. Immigration, identity, inaction. But behind the noise was a family grieving the same unbearable loss. A daughter stolen. A future erased. Another Lisa. Sweden, before Lisa, the case of Ingela Höglund. Dalarna County, Sweden. 10-year-old Ingela was biking home after soccer practice. A convicted rapist, recently released from prison, abducted and murdered her. The public exploded in rage. Why was he ever let out? Why hadn't there been monitoring? The pattern is cruel. Known predators, repeat offenses, deadly results. Ingela's case led to new GPS monitoring laws. But 7 years later, Lisa Holm would still fall through the cracks. Missed warnings, missed lives. What do these cases have in common? Known offenders living undetected. Victims dismissed at first as runaways. Communities blindsided by horror. It's not about culture. It's not about nationality. It's about neglect. When background checks fail, when warning signs go ignored, when predators are given second chances at the cost of someone's life, we get tragedies like Lisa's, and then we ask the same question again. How could this happen here? The warning signs are always there. Let's go back to Lisa's killer, Narigis Bilovicius. He had a controlling nature, noted even by relatives. He was secretive, avoided social integration. He had anger issues documented in previous workplaces, yet no red flags were raised, no alerts triggered, no background checks enforced when he came to Sweden for work. He blended in, found isolation, and then he struck. Monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear overalls. Sometimes they speak softly. Sometimes they move in next door. The rural danger. Lisa lived in a town of just a few hundred. Quiet, safe, familiar. But rural areas, so often romanticized, have real vulnerabilities. Sparse police presence, limited cell coverage, few street cameras, long distances between homes. Predators know this. That's why so many attacks happen on country roads, trails, parking lots, and abandoned barns, just like the one Lisa was taken to. Lisa's murder wasn't random. It was opportunistic. He knew she'd be alone. He knew no one would hear her. He knew no help would come in time. And he was right. History repeats until we interrupt it. For every Lisa Holm, Wilma Anderson, or Maria Leidenberger, there are dozens more stories that never make the news. Women who vanish, girls never found, families begging for answers, and the thread that ties them all together? The system didn't act until it was too late. We remember the names. We hold the vigils. We demand change. But then, another candle, another cross, another story. The cycle won't stop itself. A cultural shift begins. In Sweden and across Europe, Lisa's case, and others like it, have sparked deep reflection. Should violent offenders face lifetime monitoring? Should temporary workers undergo deeper vetting? Should missing girls always be treated as high priority? The answer? Yes, yes, and yes. Because we've seen the cost of delay. The cost of maybe she ran away. The cost of silence. Lisa didn't have to die, but she did. Let her story be the last. Building a safer future. Here's what experts and survivors now recommend. Immediate escalation when minors go missing. Digital panic apps linked to emergency responders. Mandatory safety audits at isolated workplaces. Stronger EU-wide criminal database integration. Rural-specific crime response training. These aren't big asks. They're basic protections. And every time another girl is found too late, it proves how badly we need them. The echo you can't ignore. Lisa's voice may be gone, but the echo she left behind is loud. It lives in every mother who checks in more often. Every girl who clutches her keys between her knuckles. Every lawmaker pushed into action. Every young woman who says, "I don't feel safe, and that's not okay." Lisa isn't just a victim. She's a signal, a call to wake up, a reminder that the danger is real, but preventable. You've heard Lisa's story. Now hear the echoes. Share this documentary. Demand stronger laws. Don't let the next tragedy come without a fight. The time to act isn't after the disappearance. It's now, because every minute we wait, another girl walks alone. And another predator waits in the dark. Lisa's death should have ended this cycle. Let it be the last scream we didn't hear in time. Lisa Holm's death shook Sweden. But what came after? That changed it. Because Lisa didn't just leave behind pain. She left behind a blueprint. A reason for the country to finally confront what it had ignored. This chapter is not about sorrow. It's about transformation. From tragedy to policy. In the wake of Lisa's murder, Sweden did what many nations fail to do. It listened. It didn't blame the victim. It didn't sweep the case under the rug. It didn't wait for another name to trend. Instead, it acted. The Swedish parliament, moved by public outcry, expert reports, and raw grief, introduced a package of reforms now unofficially known as Lisa's Law. Not one law, but a collection. A framework designed to make sure no other girl suffered the same fate. Let's break it down. 1. The immediate response protocol. Before Lisa's case, missing persons, especially teenagers, were often met with one phrase: let's wait 24 hours. But time is everything. Every hour counts. Every minute matters. Under Lisa's Law, that changed. Now in Sweden, all missing minors under 18 are treated as high risk from the moment they're reported. Local law enforcement is required to initiate search procedures immediately, no delay. Rural municipalities received special funding to develop response units trained for hard-to-reach terrain. Because Lisa's killer used time, he knew no one would come looking fast. Now, they come running. 2. Digital safety enhancements. Lisa had a phone. She sent her last text at 6:23 p.m. But by the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Lisa's Law introduced a push for digital self-defense. A government-supported safety app, SOS New, lets young people send live location alerts to parents and emergency services. Features include time check-ins, fake call features to escape dangerous situations, voice-activated distress triggers, real-time GPS beaconing when a panic alert is activated. Schools across Sweden are now required to teach digital safety tools by age 14. Lisa never had that chance. Now every girl does. 3. Background checks on foreign contractors. Let's talk about the man who killed her, Narigis Bilavicius. He entered Sweden legally. He worked in a country barn. He blended in with the migrant workforce. But he came from Lithuania. And back home, he had a violent history. That never came up, because at the time, cross-border criminal database checks were inconsistent at best. Lisa's Law tackled this. All foreign workers in security-sensitive or isolated locations must undergo full EU criminal background screening before employment. If red flags are found, employment is denied and local authorities are notified. A shared EU offender alert list was fast-tracked, connecting countries sharing risks, saving lives. Lisa's death exposed the cracks. Lisa's Law sealed them. 4. Employer responsibility in remote locations. Lisa was closing up a small café in the countryside. She was alone. Her employer hadn't arranged for secure transport. There were no safety escorts, no cameras, no backup. That changed. Under new regulations, rural businesses employing minors must provide verified end-of-shift escorts, security camera coverage, emergency contact monitoring. Any job requiring solitary late hours must now file a safety assurance plan with the municipality. It's not complicated. It's common sense. But it took Lisa's death to make it law. A family's quiet fight. Lisa's parents didn't campaign for fame. They didn't flood the media. They fought in silence. In parliament meetings. In private conversations. In midnight emails to lawmakers. They pushed for one thing: protection for every other girl. When the laws passed, they didn't make a big speech. They simply released a short statement. This won't bring Lisa back, but if it saves even one girl, then it matters. That's what real justice looks like. Not revenge, not rage, prevention, trauma support and recovery. Lisa's classmates were shattered. Her little brother couldn't sleep for weeks. Even seasoned police officers admitted this case broke them. Trauma lingers long after sirens stop. Lisa's Law included the first federally funded victim trauma initiative in Sweden. Free counseling for classmates, witnesses, and family members. Specialized training for teachers and school psychologists. Local trauma response teams activated within 24 hours of youth-targeted crimes. Because healing isn't optional, it's essential. You don't just recover from a murder, but with support, you carry it differently. Seeds of change, the Lisa Holm Scholarship. Out of her legacy, something beautiful bloomed. Each year, one Swedish student pursuing animal science or environmental conservation receives the Lisa Holm Scholarship. It's given to someone who, embodies Lisa's compassion, promotes safety and justice in their community, believes in making something good. The winners often speak of her like a guardian. Because Lisa didn't just lose her dream, she passed it on. International ripple effect. Other countries took note. Denmark revamped its rural emergency protocols. Finland launched an identical immediate response law. Germany increased data sharing efforts across borders. Lisa's story is taught in criminology courses, legal training, and child protection seminars. She became more than a case. She became a symbol. Proof that one girl's story can change a nation. A final note from the cafe where Lisa worked. It's still open, but it's different now. At the corner table, there's a small memorial. A photograph of Lisa, a sunflower in a glass jar, and a guest book filled with notes from visitors across the world. You mattered, Lisa. We remember. Thank you for your light. The new staff closes in pairs. The town added 2 streetlights along the road she walked. There are cameras now. No one walks alone anymore. Not because the world is perfect, but because they learned. If Lisa Holm's story has moved you, don't just feel something. Do something. Share her legacy. Talk about safety. Support the laws that protect young women. Evil thrives in silence. Change begins with noise. So make noise. For Lisa. For every girl who walks home alone. For every parent who prays the phone doesn't ring. Lisa Holm's story did not end in that barn. It continues in laws, in lives, in light. Let her legacy live through you. A name we won't forget. Lisa Holm was just 17. She loved animals. She dreamed of adventure. She smiled with her whole heart. She should have had 1,000 more mornings. A lifetime of laughter. Firsts, mistakes, love, everything. But one man, one moment, one missed warning, took it all away. Her death was brutal, but it wasn't meaningless. Because from that darkness came change. From that silence came law. And from her story came a movement. Lisa didn't choose to be a symbol. She just wanted to go home. But now, she's the reason thousands more will. So, if this story shook you, don't scroll past. Subscribe for more true crime stories that demand justice. Share Lisa's name. Speak out when you see systems failing. And never stay silent about safety. Because the next Lisa shouldn't happen. And if she does, it won't be because we didn't try. Rest in peace, Lisa Holm. Your light didn't fade. It lit the way.